We're a small indie studio based out of Seattle, mostly tackling building games that are trying to take a new spin on things. So we're kind of tackling racing game genre and bringing something new to it. And yeah, we're about 4 people. We've been working for about, I would say, 2.5 years or so on our project. So the way that we're using Excelbyte in our game Sun Rivals, we're in the jersey now. So Sun Rivals is a racing shooter hybrid. So it's what we call a death race royale. And so we're using it for all of our skill-based matchmaking, custom lobbies, peer-to-peer achievements, things like that. And also really help us type into esports element. And so if we see some footage of the game on the background, it's really high stakes esports competition. And so we're using it for also trying to dynamically load sponsorships into the race. And so we're using Excelbyte Extend and some of the extra features inside of it. So you can see brands integrated directly into it. So it's not just players matchmaking, it's being able to customly load stuff based off of roles and your region and your match IDs. So that lets us show players and help brands target different types of players, loading in their billboards and flags and icons throughout the match. If you want to go and find us on Steam or Epic Games, you can search Ascent Rivals. We're open alpha playtesting, moving into beta hopefully in the near future. We went to GDC 2022, I believe, and we were kind of on the verge of approaching that point where we're trying to figure out what we're doing for our backend solution. We knew our games were going to be a multiplayer, and so just by happenstance, we found the booth at GDC, spoke to one of the representatives, very friendly actually. So we got introduced to like 3 people talking to us at the booth, walked us through quite a bit of detail, even technical depth. On the show floor. So we were pretty stoked to actually start working and looking into Excelbyte even while we were at the conference. So we were doing a lot of kind of digging into you guys there. But yeah, pretty much all started from GDC. As a small indie team, one of the things that we kind of talk a lot about is making it easy for ourselves to kind of tackle an online game network. So things that help with like matchmaking, queue times, lobbies, social integrations. So that would be like Steam, PSN, Xbox, like all these things is a big undertaking, especially match-made games, right? Like if you want to do skill-based matchmaking, it's not a trivial undertaking, and especially when you're doing cross-play, cross-platform, things like that. It's quite a large task. So that's definitely why we were starting to look for solutions rather than rolling around, because it would not be feasible as a small indie studio by ourselves. We were looking at different solutions, so we were kind of just perusing around. So we looked at like PlayFab, Epic Games has their own kind of solution as well, Unity has their own. And so when we were actually have a project both in Unity and Unreal, it was really hard to nail down with one of those because, you know, obviously we don't want to have 2 custom solutions. So yeah, we were just kind of perusing, I would say, when we luckily stumbled into you guys at Excelbyte. One of the things that we always talked about internally as an indie studio was, do we really want to go with a networked game? Because your first foray into the industry, you know, there's a lot of stuff working as a new team, launching your own product, marketing, like finding a publisher if that's the route that people want to go. There's just so many unknowns, and networking just adds another layer of complexity. And so that was something that really was a kind of a point of contention and uncertainty for us. And so really, I would say before it was probably unrealistic for a small indie team to do networking. And so just kind of wanted to share our experience working with Excelbyte, that I think it has become feasible with solutions like Excelbyte. Working with the support team, even as a small indie team, we get a lot of support. So the turnaround time is quite awesome in trying to understand our use cases and really just asking us questions of like, okay, what is it that you're trying to do exactly? Try to check out these solutions and how you might integrate this web SDK or this endpoint has been super helpful for us. So yeah, I think what is possible in the indie scene has kind of elevated a lot since solutions like Excelbyte. I would say it would have been infeasible. So we did a little bit of like internal costing. And so the things that went into consideration for us were staffing. So even just putting out job proposals there, interviewing, we didn't have the expertise internally to even interview for it. So that would have been a difficulty. But having, say, 2 to 4 engineers that would tackle just this problem is probably what it would have taken. So that would have been on-ramping cost, obviously their salary, and then just all the partner integrations, all those things that Accelerate already does for you. Of course, there are people that have claimed to have done it with a smaller, even solo dev, but I typically found that those are lackluster in terms of you're really just getting the bare functionality. And then when things do go awry, say your backend goes down, you really want a robust solution there. So yeah, indie teams typically don't do multiplayer games from our experience. Like true indie teams is really far in between where most indie success stories are like, if you notice, they're single player games, right? So I believe this is kind of like our first really lucky timing hitting the market, finding Excel-Byte. It probably would have been at least a year, but given that we didn't have experience in the backend solution before, you kind of don't know what you don't know. So we would say a year, but realistically probably would have been longer than that, considering all those things I just mentioned, if we didn't have Excel-Byte. So we've used AMS, which I believe it used to be called, moving over from Armada. And so right now we're a very small indie team, so we're in the starter tier, but we've integrated with AMS, so that allows us to do like a lot of the dedicated servers, different regions, things like that, and really integrate and test that before. So we know we can scale up to that when we do move out of the starter tier again. So that was one of the solutions we integrated with. The other one that we're doing right now is Excel-Byte Extend. And so that's going to be letting us go over and do things like more custom tailored solutions for we need like relational databases to be a little bit more tailored to us. And so we're using Extend for that. And then the last one that we're doing is using the kind of the web SDK to seamlessly integrate one of our kind of technical partners, or we're building on top of a blockchain called Cardano. And so it offers a lot of user functionality that's really robust, and there's a lot of like stigma against it in the kind of game community, for mostly stemming from the utilities there, but the overhaul process that you have to do for users, there's a lot of stuff that the user has to go through and jump through. But because we are integrating with Excel-Byte's kind of web SDK, it lets us kind of seamlessly integrate these solutions into our account sign-in flow as kind of like a really seamless transition. So as if you're logging in with Steam and stuff like that, we're able to kind of like hide a lot of the pain points for the user. So I would say it's not exactly Excel-Byte, but it lets us integrate with these Web3 technologies, make us work with Cardano a lot easier. Definitely, it's a whole initiative or effort to do backend matchmaking services, all that stuff. And so things like spinning up match pools, figuring out how to do different regions, things that are being offered to like shops, items, matchmaking like roles, limited time items, things. All this stuff is all provided for us in Excel-Byte. And so it's funny because we're actually learning it as we dive into a little bit deeper of like all the offerings. And so being able to have a really nice UI of like, here's all the things that you could be doing, and here's the API endpoints. We're actually learning by using Excel-Byte a lot of, oh yeah, thankfully we're using this solution because we forgot that this would have been something we would have had to roll out ourselves. And it's made pretty easily for us. And the support team has been super on point with us, so really quick to turn around and actually addressing a lot of our cases. And so I believe we had numerous tickets open and taking our suggestions or finding a solution for us. So I would say that's definitely been a part of the learning process as well, is just working alongside the Excel-Byte kind of support team.